Hello everyone and welcome back to JB's Total Gaming, where today I'm going to try to do something that's probably pretty stupid for me to do live and on video, and that is build a deck in New Legends of the Five Rings. Now, the reason I'm doing this video is twofold, and it's mostly for new players of the game, but obviously I'm welcome all veterans of the game, the older game and the new game, who, if you feel the need to give some tips or advice, I appreciate that as well. But the main point of this video isn't to tell people this is how you build a deck and the one way you do it. There are a lot of different thought processes out there about how you should go about building a deck. However, this video is purpose twofold for new players to give you, number one, some kind of main idea, some kind of questions that you should be asking yourself as you're going along in guidelines. Now, I'm going to be talking through the decisions that I make in this, but not every decision I'm going to make is going to be right for every player and their playstyle and what they want to do, and I'm probably just going to make some maybe bad decisions along the way. But a big part of building a deck is going out and testing that deck and playing that. And by the way, Steve, if you're watching this, maybe don't watch all the way through so you don't know what I'm playing against you next time. But anyways, also the point of this not only to give you some broad general ideas to help new players in building decks, it's also to show new players that building a deck in L5R can seem pretty intimidating at first, but it really may not be as intimidating as you think. Again, you got to get out there and play test it and make changes. Now, you have to play multiple games. You shouldn't just, play one game and go, oh, this thing beat me and completely tech against that. You have to have more information in that, but it's kind of to show off particularly one way that you can have to go about building a deck and the steps you may take in building that deck. Now, to give you some background for this deck, we're going to be building a Scorpion deck. Now, one thing I want to point out right off the bat, my first bit of advice for new players when building decks is you need to think about your win condition. Anything can inspire a deck. You can be like, this character is really cool, I want to use this ability, and then try to build around that, but then you can eventually realize that I don't know how to build it. I don't have the tools to build around this one ability. I need to figure out maybe what works with this ability. And maybe you end up finding enough tools that kind of synergize and you have this cool thing. And you might have this deck you think is really great because you found every card that potentially synergizes with this one concept you want to do. But is that deck ever going to win? You always need to ask yourself, what is my win condition? And it's easy to put together, maybe a value deck or something like that. And maybe if you're putting together a value deck and your idea is just kind of slow incremental advantage, that's fine. That can be a win condition, but you kind of have to be able to figure out how exactly is that going to work. And in Legend of the Five Rings with several different win conditions, that's something else to bear in mind. I particularly bring that up because this is a Scorpion deck, and one of the things you have to think about in this game is, what does my faction do? Do I really want to hone in on that? Or do I want to be more general? Do I want to be as consistent as possible and have cards that I can use in multiple situations? Do I want to try to do one thing? So with Scorpion, that's interesting because one of the things they do is that they can dishonor. Now, they can do abilities where they dishonor themselves, but they can also dishonor opponents. The way the Scorpion is dishonor an opponent. So you might think that Scorpion dishonor win condition is a thing that you can go for. So I can say to myself at this point, okay, now how do I want to win? Do I want to win straight up by dishonor? Or do I want to be more open? Do I want to go for dishonor, pressuring my opponent into constantly only drawing one card every turn, and then maybe try to win on provinces by going after political because I'm good at that? Do I want to have a more balanced approach? And these are questions we need to ask because when we're making decisions as to what cards to cut and what cards to keep in, we have to figure out what do we want to do. So there will be decisions along the way where maybe if I was playing one style, I'd pick one choice, another style, I'd pick another choice. So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to do a deck that may not be any good at all. But the reason that, because I haven't built a Dishonor deck yet, so I don't necessarily know how to do this well. But the reason I'm picking that I want to go all in on Dishonor, because one school of thought is you can just pick an idea and run with it and pick every card that goes with it. That may not work all that well because you need to think about all different kinds of situations. You also need to think about how is this deck going to lose at some point also. So if I just did that, then I might end up dishonoring myself. I might just lose engagement so quickly that I'm just out of it. So one thing I do want to say though is for this deck, our idea is going to be to try to win by dishonor. Yes, if we have to adapt and win by breaking provinces, probably by political strength, then that's fine. And this is one thing about this game, you have to be willing to adapt. But I think we're going to go for an overall goal of the win condition of dishonor, so that won't inform decisions that we make. So let's go ahead and get down to looking at cards. And when we're looking at this, one thing that I want to talk about is I think it's probably easiest in L5R specifically to start with your Dynasty deck, because you don't have as many options, especially right now that there's only 3 expansions. I think the 4th expansion might have just dropped now, but right now, at time of recording, I have 3, and in the core set. So you don't have a ton of Dynasty options, and in general, you're going to have some easier decisions, particularly with this deck, because I don't think a lot of the neutrals in the Dynasty are all that great for this deck. But let's get down to that and take a look at our choices, because this will be an easier start of the process. Now, we'll think about our other decks when we do this, and we'll talk about that, but let's go ahead and start with that. Now, obviously, when you're building a deck, you're going to have your stronghold. So our stronghold is going to allow us to take fate from our opponent when we have less fate than them. So this is something we definitely want to remember to trigger. And I think that with this deck, I'm probably going to plan on bidding relatively high the first round, ensuring that we have less honor than our opponent, triggering it as often as we can, and then pushing fate after that first round. So now, we are also a Seeker of the Void, which brings us into our actual provinces. So there are several different schools of thought in provinces. There's a lot of different ways you can go with this. Some people really like the surprise effects. There's even a dragon character that can let you reactivate, if I remember correctly. I personally like getting provinces that are going to be difficult to attack into over and over again. They have a continuing effect. I like that also because I'm planning on playing somewhat defensively with this deck, trying to lengthen out the game. Now, if I have to go and push provinces to win, that's fine. You need to adapt. But I want to have provinces that aren't just going to be easy for my opponents to jump back into right away. So I decided to go with 2 Void in this one. Although there weren't 2, there was only 1 Void I really liked. It was a tough choice. And I believe I left out Fire in this one. Yes. So I didn't really like the fire or water options, but I ended up going with the 2 Void and getting rid of the fire. But the ones I went with were Meditations of the Tau. During this conflict, choose an attached character, remove 1 fate from that character. So again, this makes it a little bit more difficult for my opponent to attack with strong characters, because in general, strong characters are going to have fate until the last round that they're out there. But I kind of like that one. I did go with Entrenched Positions just because, even though I don't particularly love the 2 that make it harder to attack with military or with political, we're really weak military with what I'm planning on going with. So I decided that this would at least make it somewhat difficult. Secret Cache, I think, is fantastic, and this as a reaction allows us to look through the top 5 cards, and in our conflict deck and pick one. I really like this one, and it's nice for us because we're going to be pressuring our opponent and probably picking 1 on our honor dial every turn after turn 1. So I think that this will really help out, and that's nice. Shameful Display, I think, is fantastic. And obviously, we're going to want to dishonor our opponents. Honoring us, is nice, but dishonoring our opponents is going to be big. So I really like Shameful Display. It's maybe my favorite one. And then Pilgrimage. I went with Pilgrimage mostly because of the 5, just because it's going to be difficult to break. I didn't really love my options for a second Void, for fire, or for water, but that's what I went with. So next up, what I suggest doing is laying out, and this is again one way of doing it. This is just a suggestion. But laying out the cards in your dynasty and doing it, if you notice here, I went with holdings, and I went with 1 cost, 2 cost, 3 cost, 4, 5 costs, so on and so forth, because we get to look a little bit at our curve, which will be more important. Well, it's hard to say. It's important. It isn't like other games, but you don't want to have, unless maybe you're playing line and you're planning on charging in some of your higher value cards or something like that, you kind of want to have a somewhat balance. You want to have available options at different levels of cost. But again, we're not going to have too many options here, and only having to get down to 40 cards, because I do believe you can have decks to run more than 40, but I believe in consistency in most games running the minimum number of cards that you can, because while you can get more types of cards in, when you go more towards the 45 range, because you're limited to 40 to 45, I like if I can, going with just 40 and trying to be as consistent as I possibly can. So what I went through is I basically tapped down some cards that I might be willing to cut. Now, I did that already just to remember which cards that I did that with, but we'll talk about my decisions here. First, let's talk about holdings. In general, I think 4 to 6 holdings is a pretty good bet to go with. If you are Crab, you have reasons to go with more than that because you get synergies with those. And I think with this, I was debating, and I think that Storehouse is really nice for us. I'm going to go with 3 of the Imperial Storehouse, the neutral one, because this is going to allow us to draw from our conflict deck. And again, we're going to want to stop our opponents from drawing. We're going to be drawing very little after the first round. So this is just a nice thing that allows us to discard this and draw for 1. So I think that's a nice effect. Now, the City of Lies up here, this one I like. It lets us lower cost of conflict cards. We're definitely going to have some conflict cards with cost, but I don't love that one. And because I wanted to go with at least 4, so I kind of tapped down the rest. I could go with more than 1. This is one of these things that we can add or subtract. So I kind of set that one up, kind of some tap, some not, or bowed, however you want to look at it, so that I could bear that in mind. That's one that we could go back to. Now, personally, I think that the Back Alley Hideout is an interesting card. There's lots of text on it. It's kind of fun, but I don't necessarily think it's all that good. So I went ahead and tapped that one. So as far as our 1 cost, again, we're not going to have to get rid of too many characters. And in general, when it comes to characters, there will be exceptions to this. I like playing 3 of in cards. Now, I do think there is an argument to be made for 2 ofs in some situations, and even 1 ofs. And the reason why I say there might be a reason for 1 ofs, and we might run into this more with our conflict deck, is maybe you have a card that serves a similar role to another card. So even though it's only a 1 of that card, you were getting to 40, and maybe it makes a 4th of a type of card. You've got 3 of one type, and this one does a similar function. So that's why some people might say, oh, why would you ever run a 1 of? Well, if it's a 1 of doing something similar to something else that I just want a little bit more boost in, I think it makes sense. But in general, I think we're going to go for 3 ofs for most of this deck. All right. So, this guy, the Liar here, a -3 for 1. I think he's fantastic. You get to draw a card when he leaves play. Just a great card. Obvious 3 of. And then this card here, with our champion that has the ability to get rid of people if we take them down to 0 political. Even though this is a -, they can't compete. Their ability to give a character -2/-2 is fantastic. I think that's a 3 of. So we have at least, we may have some conflict characters, we'll see. There's not a lot of conflict characters, actually, in Scorpion, and we'll look at that, but I think we don't necessarily need 9 1-drops, and I'm not a huge fan. Now, we do have Courtier on this card, so that's something you want to bear in mind. And one thing is you want to be thinking about what you're going to put in your conflict deck when you're building this. This is the easier choice, and you can always go back and make changes, but you want to make sure you have enough options. If we're playing Dishonor, we're going to be playing cards that we're going to need the Courtier effect. That just goes without saying. However, looking through, we have plenty of Courtier options, so I'm not worried about if I didn't have enough options. I'd consider putting this in, but I'm not too worried about it. And this one allows us to increase our honor dial, and honestly, I'm going to be more interested in lowering it and hurting our opponent. I'm probably going to be bidding 1 after the first round, so I don't think that's a big huge effect on us, so that's why I'm willing to tap that one. The Blackmail Artist is great. Again, we want to pressure our opponent for honor. And this is a character, you attack with this character, your opponent has to defend even if they don't want to, or else they're going to lose 2 honor if you're attacking on political, so that's fantastic, because if they win a political, you lose 1. So, let's see here. The Illusionist, spend a fate, choose a character, discard a status token from that character. That is, alright, we're going to be dishonoring ourselves quite a bit. Hopefully we'll be able to do it a lot on cards that are not going to be hurting us too much, cards that have already been in a conflict and are going away, things like that. However, that's an ability I don't expect to use a lot, but a 1/3 for 2 also isn't bad, so it's a maybe on the ability. I actually thought about potentially not using the Occultist here. 2/2 for 2 is okay. They're basically a 3/3 if we have less honor than our opponent. I plan on having more honor later in the game, but for probably the majority of the game, we may have less. So originally, I actually actually had this card tapped or bowed as a potential leave out, but I ended up having more space than I expected. So this was the first one I brought back in. So that's something else you can do, is think about, what am I willing to take out? What's not necessary, and then look at it. You're at the end of when you're looking at things, especially with your conflict deck, you're probably going to have way too many cards and have to cut. Sometimes you have an opening, you can bring something back in, and so this was the first one I brought back in when I was thinking about it. The Pyromancer is, okay, again, a 2/2 for 2, and I really like this ability. We get to control who gets honored or dishonored. So if our opponent's honoring, we can say, no, honor, that person is going to be useless, things like that. So it's an ability where we're going to be doing a lot of dishonoring and things like that. So I think it's going to be a nice ability. It's going to be handy for us. So even though that is just a 2 for 2, I mean, a 2/2 for 2 isn't bad, and that's an ability I think we will probably be using during the game. So there we have our stronghold and what we're doing here. All right, so in the 3 drops, now this will be interesting. We'll get into this. So, do we like the jury here for the 3/1 for 3? Isn't fantastic. I considered leaving this in because we don't have a lot of military, and that's a problem. So when this character's participating in conflict, ignore the effects of the status token. So basically, ignore honor and dishonor. That's a card I might add back in. I'd consider that card. The reason I'm not using it right now is because we're also going to be want to be dishonoring our opponent. So I'm not sure if I love that. I do like it because of the 3 military. That's a card that could go back in potentially, or maybe not. So even we can debate. We can kind of leave some sideways or whatnot, and that's a maybe. But because that ability is going to potentially also be harmful to us, I don't necessarily love that idea, and it's not for a 3/1 or a 1/3 for 3, which isn't great stats in general. I really want to like the ability, and that's an ability I'm iffy on. Okay, the favored niece. This is I think is really nice. We discard a card to draw a card, basically, so we can cycle through and get answers we need. Despite being a 2/2 for 3, I think that's a powerful ability, and we can do it twice per round. So I am perfectly all right with that. And again, sometimes cycling can be almost as important, if not as important as draw, if you're just trying to get to the answers that you need. So the actress here, again, this is a 1/3 for 3, but I really like this ability. It allows us to sacrifice her and then go get a character from our opponent's discard that is, I believe, 3 or less. So that is pretty nice, a non-shinobi one. So we can play this character, potentially maybe not put any fate on it if our opponent at this point has a discard pile, use it in the engagement, comes home bowed, and then bring in something else. And that's what makes this card pretty powerful, which is neat. So here's one that I have bowed right now, and you might say 3/2 for 3 isn't too terrible, and you might say this character, after you play a character from your hand, your opponent must select one, discard a card at random, or choose and dishonor a character. Now you might say that's an auto include because losing cards pressures your opponent to do more on their honor when they're drawing cards. Dishonoring obviously helps you out. However, this is, again, thinking about what is in your conflict, because we don't have a lot of characters in our conflict, and some of them are higher cost. So there's one we're definitely going to play that, just think about what we have that we're able to bring back into our hand. I really like that one. So then there's the 3-cost Covert. The 3-cost Covert is really nice, but we may not be playing it in this deck if we're just focusing on Dishonor. And this is the sort of choice I'm talking about. I'd definitely be playing that character if we're playing a balance, pressure our opponent, maybe win by Dishonor, maybe win by taking provinces. But if I'm only running 3 characters out of my conflict, and I'm not allying or splashing in with a faction, like, say, Dragon, where I can bring in a tattooed character that brings Covert or something like that, which, again, I might be doing in a game where we're trying to win by conflicts and pressure by Dishonor, then maybe this character's ability isn't that great. So we'll see. All right, now these ones, the high-cost ones, we don't even really need to talk about them. I think they all have abilities that are useful to us. First of all, a 4 in military is nice and allowing to switch character stats, basically. All right, 04 seems pretty bad. However, being able to dishonor with this character is nice, and then obviously our leader, just fantastic ability, potentially getting rid of people, and we're going to be using this character and then some other things in our conflict deck to try to do that. So looking through what we had in our in the neutral cards, I don't think there's a lot of great neutral options for this deck. I thought about the Seeker Initiate, so this again will allow us to look through some cards and search, but I don't know if it's worth it for its value. That we have a few other ways to try and draw cards, and the Mystic here for control of attachments and things like that. Again, I don't think it's necessarily worth it for the cost. Now, obviously, if we splash and dragon, we can just use drop it, and so this is a card to maybe think about, but we also have the ability to dishonor and take attachments if we really need to. So I'm iffy on those. So at this point, we can kind of count. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 cards that we are running 3 of. So basically, if we do the math, if we want to run one of these, which we were kind of thinking right now, we could go up to 13. So, okay, again, these were options I thought about in the neutral, but I'm not really too sure about those. So we could basically bring 3 more cards in. So let's do the math here. If I remember correctly, 13 times 3, 39, 40 with the City of Lies. So, again, now I did some of this thinking beforehand to get to this point, but we're basically now one decision away from having our deck. And this is a really tough decision. Both of these characters give us 3 in military, so maybe we want to bring these in. I think I like both of those characters better than these 2 that I thought about in the neutral dynasty deck. So at this point, which one do we want to bring in? Well, I said this ability is iffy, and then this one... we just may not trigger it. So if this ability I think is going to potentially hurt us as much as help us, and this one we at least may be able to use, and maybe we'll make a decision to add 1 or 2 of the covert characters to help us out or whatever when we get into the conflict. We'll see about that. And we also have a 5-cost conflict character that we recently got, so that's an interesting thing. So I'm thinking, even though I put this down just because I wasn't sure if we'd trigger the ability, still a 3-2 for 3 isn't awful. And if we do trigger the ability, it's just helpful to us. Whereas in this one, it may actually hurt us. Again, it could help us, and I'm sure better players than me can probably use this card more effectively than I can, but I'm thinking we bring this up. And so now, we were thinking about maybe doing 1 or 2 of the city. Well, if we do 1, there we go. We have our 40 card. Now, that was the easier decision making because we had less options to think about, but overall, so there we go with our dynasty deck. And again, off screen I kind of did these, and these I didn't want to get too into because it's going to be based on how you want to play. I don't necessarily think I'm trying to think how to word this. I did try to make decisions though where I'm thinking if we're hoping to maybe defend provinces multiple times, so I wanted to make things hurt for opponents to repeatedly come into us and not just give them a bunch of freebies. We do have the one that's harder militarily, so that doesn't really punish them, but we're so good at political that would just make that province, again, harder to take, which is in a way, also fantastic. So there we go. There's our 40C Dynasty deck. So, and our provinces and all that. Now let's go ahead and get into the much harder decisions to make with the conflict deck. Alright, now so for our conflict deck, I went ahead and, took all the cards that we get from Scorpion, and then a bunch of cards that I think we might be interested in using as neutral cards, and I made some definite decisions and some maybe decisions. So, Seal the Scorpion, we're just not using. That might be a good card at some point, but it's just not that useful right now. Alright, the Edict is going to give us some protection, some cancellation. I think that's important. We have plenty of courtier characters, so we're not worried about that. I would even like maybe a little bit more protection, some cancellation in this deck, but it's a good card. We're going to have the courtiers to use it, so that's nice. Alright, Way the Scorpion, obviously we're going to want in this deck. Alright, Misinformation. The reason I went ahead and took this one out is that I don't know if we're really going to have a higher bid than our opponent any turn other than turn 1. And it could be useful, but I just wasn't sure about that. Meek Informant, I really, really thought about, and when I talked about this card before, I mentioned that I feel like this card is for a better player than me, who's going to do a good job at remembering my opponent's deck. I think it would actually be pretty good in this deck, because we're going to try to force our opponent to not draw many cards, but I just don't know if it really suits my play style, and that's why I think for a lot of people this might be a pretty cool card. It's not cool for me. All right, so this one is Smoke and Mirrors. So this one, again, I said when I reviewed that card, I think it'll be good at some point. It's not for this deck. It's not. I don't think it's necessarily for Scorpion just yet, but I think it will see play eventually with more Shinobi characters. Court Mask, I think, is fantastic. It's a great attachment. We can get a lot of value on it. Poison, we definitely want, because we're going to, with our leader trying to be taking guys down to 0 political and getting rid of them, calling in favors, that's going to be our main way of dealing with attachments. We'll probably just have to deal with them for the most part unless we splash with Dragon, which is a pretty common thing to do. So but we definitely want that in the deck, and we're gonna maybe just try to deal with some not so great attachments and use that on the really powerful ones. You may say, oh, I Can Swim, that can be really powerful. I think I Can Swim was maybe a little bit overrated initially. People thought it was super powerful, but it involves setup. It's a 2 cost, and again, we're often not going to have a higher bid than our opponent after turn 1, so that's why I went ahead and just got rid of I Can Swim. It's a tough cut. It's a super powerful card, but I just don't think it's right for this deck and the way I want to play. I'm not saying it's bad, I just don't think it's as good as initially thought. Alright, Adept of Shadows we're definitely going to use. Now you can see kind of tapped here on these. Alright, Blackmail is a great card. Ambush is a great card. And I honestly believe the Unassuming Yojimbo is also a great card. However, these 3 costs, I don't know how often we're going to save up for it. And if we're really trying to break provinces as our main way of winning and pressure with Dishonor, then I think we would consider both of these, but at that high of a cost, and we're probably going to be less honorable than our opponent a lot for Blackmail, and take control of a 2 cost or less, can definitely win us an engagement, but I think there are other ways to win engagements. And Ambush, again, being able to bring stuff in, it's super powerful, can win us something, but again, I don't know if we want to save up that cost, and I don't know if that's necessarily the way we want to play. Now, the weakness of this deck is obviously we could just lose on provinces, and these cards might help us not do that, or give us the option to win on provinces, but I'm trying for a specific style with this. This may go terribly, but my decisions are more based on having a lot of options to try to play games and kind of dishonor and pressure our opponent that way, and hopefully they won't have the tools then to win in these encounters. So yeah, we don't have these cards, but our opponents won't have the tools to make big plays to finish us off. So again, the Unassuming Yojimbo I really like, but I don't know if I have the room for it. I like that covert, but we're not necessarily super focusing on winning provinces, which is why I'm not playing it. And again, this is a character that if we want to trigger that ability on the other character we weren't sure if we were playing or not, we can bring this character back and play it again. So there's definitely 3 of in here. So, and this 5-coster, this is awesome, great ability. A 5-cost conflict character is kind of cool, but I just don't necessarily think it fits in. It can definitely save us a province, but it's going to just be too hard to pull off. I think certain cards are going to function really well, so let's talk real quick about the ones I went ahead and tapped. Censure, we need the Favor, which it's a great negation card, but I don't know how often we're going to have the Favor. Policy Debate, I kind of looked at, but I feel like with Spies at Court, it's serving that function. And while we get to choose a card with this, I think getting rid of a card to choose a card, it's good, but I'd rather get rid of a card to make our opponent discard 2 cards at random. Assassination is obviously valuable. The 3 of the Fine Katanas, I think, are really valuable for us, obviously because we're weak in military to try to save provinces, maybe even win a conflict now and again, but really for that main function, just to help us out militarily. Again, For Shame, I think, is again, it's a card, we're going to have courtiers in order to play it. It's a good card when we're trying to run the kind of deck that we're trying to run here. So, and this is going to be the type of cards we're talking about that, because we have the courtier, we're obviously going to need some ways to defend ourselves and some ways to generate dishonor and things like that. So whether our opponent bows the character or dishonors us, that's good for us. Spies of Court, again, we're going to want to get rid of our opponent's options, hopefully make them want to draw cards. Bonsai is another save ourselves card. So here's the deal. These may win us some conflicts, but we're not necessarily going to want to break provinces with this deck, but we are going to want to save ourselves in military conflicts, which is why I'm going with the lower cost cards that can help us do that. that. So also, I'm liking the Finger of Jade more and more to protect the characters we really want, maybe our leader, something like that. There are going to be characters we want to keep out there, so I'm definitely thinking about this one. Outwit, obviously, pretty good card for this deck, moving a character home. Again, we're looking to save ourselves. We're going to have a lot of situations where we have somebody with more political. Contingency plan, I'm also thinking about, because we are mostly, I'm thinking about adding maybe not 3 but some, just because of the ability of contingency plan. If we're trying to finish off our opponent and bring them down to 0 honor, we can use the situation where we bid 1 and then actually lower it to 0. It doesn't actually change because there is no 0 on the dial, but it doesn't change what's on your dial when you bid for honor. It just changes the value, so it can change our value to 0 and force our opponent to lose an honor. Now this is a maybe cut. At this point, we've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So yeah, I think we have 15. Yeah. So we're over what we can do, and we haven't even splashed yet. So let's talk about what we're going to splash, and then how many cards we're going to bring in for that, and then we got to figure out what to cut. We've already cut quite a few. I've explained my reasons for those, and now we need to think a little bit more. Now, I was really debating. A lot of people just do dragon. That's all fine and dandy. However, with this deck, I am thinking that, yeah, Dragon's nice. We can get control. There's basically 3 cards in Dragon I'm thinking that can be an auto-include in almost any deck. The one that allows us to basically defend, I believe it's the Bauer character, based on their glory and how many provinces are unrevealed. Super powerful, great defensive card. We could definitely use that in this deck in order to prevent us from losing provinces. That's a really good one. There is the Tattooed, I can't remember, the 2/1 1 cost that you can use an attachment, give covert. Fantastic card, but that's for winning things. We're not as worried about that. And then there is the Drop It, which is obviously attachment control. Any combination of those I think is great depending on the deck that you are playing. If you're wanting to win provinces, then maybe with the Tattooed guy with the covert to try to do that. The control, if you're worried about playing against an opponent using a lot of attachments, obviously Drop It is great. If you want to play defensively, then that defensive card whose name has slipped my mind is great. But I actually think, first of all, we have a lot of cards we want to use, so I don't know how many cards I want to bring in. There's one card in particular that I think could really help us with this, and it is a 3 cost. So we could only bring 3 of them in because we only have 10 to work with. We're not a faction that has the 13. So let's take a look at that now. All right, so you might have guessed it. The card that I definitely wanted to go with for this faction with our splash is Watch Commander. This is one of my favorite cards in the game. I think I decided to go with this with Crab mostly because I wanted to use this card and it works well with this deck. But you can see, if we go with these 15, I think we're going to go with, we're still at 45. We got a little bit of work to do. We got to get rid of 5 cards to get down to 40. So now I think we have to make some difficult choices as far as, you know, do we want to just cut one of these all together, or do we want to start cutting individual cards? I actually think I'm going to go with cutting some individual cards here, and I'm going to make some choices that you may agree or disagree with, and but basically, we got to get rid of 5 cards. I like what all this stuff does. But one thing, we do have a lot of attachments. So I'm thinking about maybe getting rid of a couple of attachments. I think we can actually, as much as I like the mask, I think I'm actually going to get rid of one of them, and because this is a card that we can bring back into our hand. So 2 still give us a good chance of seeing at least 1 during the game, and being able to bring that into our hand, as long as we're not going to lose the game based on dishonor, I think is useful. I think I might get rid of an assassination. We're going to be getting pretty low in honor. We're going to be taking honor from our opponent. The goal is to get both of us down low. I mean, the goal is really to get our opponent down low, not just us, but we're going to be getting low as well. And I think the threat of assassination being such a common thing is maybe going to prevent our opponent from putting too much fate on a 2-drop anyways, but I still think having 2 is useful. And even if we're able to play, again, there's a good chance we'll at least see 1, and if we play 1, our opponent may see that and may think that we're playing 3 or whatever. So I think that may be one option to get rid of there. So that's 2 of the 5 we've got to go down with. Now, a lot of these other ones I'm having a difficult time going with. Now, I have a crazy idea. We could just drop contingency plan and we're good. I'm even debating dropping 2 of them, and you might say, okay, why have just a 1 of? We're definitely going to drop 1, because again, if the whole point of this is mostly to just force our opponent to be able to be dishonored and drop and force them to lose that honor. Well, do we really need 3, and is it really worth a card? I might even drop that altogether. Let's definitely drop 1. Now, I could drop 2, and you might say, why ever have a 1 of? Well, it's a thing where if we get that 1 of and we need that 1 honor, it's great to have it, and then it's not clogging up our hand. But then 2 of we're more likely to see it. So let's drop at least 1. Alright, I'm considering maybe the Finger of Jade. It's a card I really like a lot. I'd like to see maybe at least 1 of when we really need it. But we do have some cancellation out there. Not a whole lot. I'd like a little bit more cancellation and protection in this deck. But maybe we have enough, and I'm thinking maybe we drop 1 of these. And again, because we have a lot of attachments. So that's dropping 2 attachments, 1 assassination, and I think dropping 1 of these is safe. So we're down to having to drop 1 more card. And I'm really not sure what to do. Maybe we can drop a contingency plan. Maybe we drop an outwit. But again, an outwit is one of these cards that we can bring a high political character even into a military conflict and send a character home. And particularly, obviously, if that's our opponent's second attack on us, that's great. If it's the first, it's not as useful. But then again, maybe they're doing a military attack and we're sending home a character that's powerful military but doesn't really do much politically. So I'd consider maybe dropping 1 of those. But no, I like that. I think we need that protection. So and we're down to 1. So we just need to get rid of 1 more card, right? Because we've got, oh no, do we just have, yeah, we have 4. Okay. So we could just get rid of contingency plan altogether. And again, and this right here, I just do want to point out too, this choice here to go with Watch Commander and 3 of those is specifically because while I think Splashing and Dragon, there are other options, obviously. Splashing and Dragon is always strong, but this would be a decision where I'd Splash and Dragon if we were going for the win condition of actually taking out provinces and just pressuring our opponent, or more of a balanced deck where we're considering we could go for the dishonor or for the win by taking out provinces. But if we're going, and this is like the perfect example of a decision, I'd go Dragon if we were doing more balance. But because I'm just going ham and having fun with this deck, I'm just going to go all in. I think this is a great card for dishonoring and protecting us. I think this actually fits the deck perfectly because, well, it's an attachment that boosts us, but it also makes our opponent lose honor if they want to play cards into a conflict, which makes them not want to play cards into the conflict. So if they do, they get dishonor, which moves towards our win condition. If they don't, then we possibly win the conflict because of that and protect our provinces. So I just think this is an ideal card if we're going all in on dishonor. So one last one. Do we just get rid of a contingency plan? Maybe, because honestly I don't know how good that card really is, and it's a card that somehow if I end up with both of them I'm going to be frustrated unless I'm in a situation where I'm able to use both of them. So do we leave one as a silly joke in the deck? Well, here's the deal. I am pretty new to this game. I'm having fun. We're being kind of silly with this. This is honestly a card I thought about just dropping altogether, but I'm going to leave 1 in just because I think it'd be fun to be able to win with that little trick. I think the rest of the cards are going to be useful to us. I definitely could choose something else to take out, but if I do that, we're down to 40, and then we have our deck. Hey everybody, sorry about the weird random cut here, but as you can see I'm editing the video and I realized there was a problem with the conclusion. So just real quick, what I wanted to say is that this video obviously wasn't designed to teach people all the decisions to make and whatnot. It was designed for new players to help encourage them to build decks and to give you some general things that may help you in building decks. Because, well, you can go on and you can net deck and you can do all that, and I don't have any problem with that. But to me, part of the reason of playing this sort of game is the joy of building decks. It's one of my personal favorite things. For some people, it may not be. For some people who are obviously very competitive, they may be into winning and being competitive, but building the deck is part of that process. Even if you're playing casually, you can certainly go on and net deck, and that's fine if you want to do that. Maybe you don't find a lot of enjoyment in building your own deck, but this video is meant to encourage people to go out and do that and to have fun with gaming, because that's the whole reason I started this channel, to encourage people to play board games you might not have heard about otherwise. I eventually incorporated video games in general because I think when used properly, gaming can be a really fun experience. I did a video on the importance of gaming actually, and that was also when I was thinking about shutting the channel down entirely. But the thing is that's still what I'm trying to encourage people to do. I want new players to build decks. That's what this video was for. If you look at this deck and say that's awful, well, it may be a completely awful deck. But another thing I want to encourage you to try, build your own decks. Go ahead and get influences online. See what other people are playing. If you really get competitive, you want to see what's going on in the meta, see what's winning, what's doing well, what other people are playing, and maybe try to counter that or try to do that a little bit better, however you want to go about that. But this video is for new players, maybe building their first deck. And for me, this is honestly the first real deck I've legitimately made. I've played a bunch of practice games with my son. This is the first time I'm really going to play someone else. So why would I record that? The point of it was to show you that, hey, you can do it too. Here's some simple things that may help, some ideas you may want to use, may not want to use, some questions you may want to ask, how am I going to win? What am I going to lose to? But you also want to get out there and play. Maybe you have to totally scrap an idea. It doesn't work. Don't do that after one game, but get some feedback. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Play some games, learn where you need to fill in gaps. Maybe I should have done a better job in filling in gaps as opposed to strengthening things. We didn't even talk all that much about where to splash and how to splash. But that was a choice I made where I said, okay, do I want to splash to cover up my weaknesses where Dragon could really help? If I'm playing a more balanced thing, Dragon could help me win things. But instead I wanted to, instead of trying to fill in my weakness, I want to build my strengths. And I thought those 3 cards could really help me to not only dishonor my opponent, but also help me defend where I'm a little bit weak. That's why I thought it was a good compromise there. But there's some of the sort of questions you can ask and just help people, encourage you to get out and do it and get out and game. That's what this channel was started for in the first place. And that's why I was stupid enough to put a video that will probably be ridiculed for making a terrible deck out there to show you that you shouldn't be afraid to do that too, that you shouldn't be afraid to try new experience, try new things, try a faction you don't normally try a game you don't normally try, because to me, there's a lot of joy in that, and I just wanted to share that with you. So, thanks a lot for watching, everyone, and we'll talk to you again soon.